The old fluorescent lights in the St. Jude's Community Center gym always buzzed with the same low, annoying hum. It was a sound that lived in the background, just like Sister Agatha. For 30 years, she had been a shadow moving through the hallways of this old brick building in Philadelphia. She was 82 years old, her face a map of deep wrinkles, and she always wore the same long, dark dress with a stiff headpiece that covered her hair. To the young people who hung out there after school, she wasn't a person with a history. She was just the fixer. She was the one who picked up the trash, wiped down the tables, and made sure the fire exit was clear. Every afternoon at 4 o'clock, the noise level in the gym would spike. That was when the local teenagers arrived. They came with basketballs, loud voices, and attitudes that filled the room. They were good kids, mostly, but they were messy. They left chip bags on the floor and soda cans on the bleachers. They played rap music from portable speakers, the bass thumping against the walls. Sister Agatha would be there in the corner, pushing her heavy yellow mop bucket across the court. She moved slowly, her back bent in a permanent curve. The teenagers would run past her, shouting and laughing, barely giving her a second glance. To them, she was part of the building, like the scuffed-up floor or the peeling paint. They didn't see her eyes. They didn't notice that behind those thick glasses, her gaze was sharp and observant. They didn't know that she listened to everything. There was one boy, a tall 19-year-old named Tyrell, who came for the music program. The center had a small stage at the far end of the gym, separated from the basketball court by a heavy blue curtain. Tyrell had real talent. He could play the guitar and sing with a voice that sounded like it came from a man twice his age. But Tyrell was restless. He was impatient. He wanted to be famous right now. He treated the old equipment in the center carelessly. He would slam his guitar case onto the floor and yank the cords out of the amplifiers without turning them off. One Tuesday, the atmosphere was heavier than usual. It was a humid afternoon, and the air conditioning in the building was broken again. The gym felt like a greenhouse. The teenagers were sweating and cranky even before they started playing. Tyrell was in a particularly bad mood. He had auditioned for a big music competition in the city the day before and hadn't heard back yet. The waiting was eating him alive. He stormed into the gym, carrying his guitar on his back. He didn't say hello to anyone. He just marched behind the blue curtain and plugged in his amplifier. He turned the volume up all the way. The feedback squeal that came through the speakers made everyone in the basketball court cover their ears. "Turn it down!" someone shouted from the bleachers. "Mind your business!" Tyrell shouted back. He started playing a fast, angry chord progression. He wasn't playing a song, he was just venting his frustration. The music was loud, messy, and aggressive. Sister Agatha was on her knees, scrubbing a stain near the baseline. She didn't jump at the noise. She didn't scold him. She just kept scrubbing. But she stopped moving her hands for a moment. She turned her head slightly toward the stage. She listened to the way his fingers were tripping over the frets. She could hear the mistakes, but she could also hear the potential. She could hear the pain in his playing that he was trying too hard to hide. She stood up slowly, using the mop handle to support her weight. Her knees popped audibly. She wiped her hands on her apron and began to walk toward the stage area. The basketball game continued on the court, the ball bouncing rhythmically thump, 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 but near the stage, the air was thick with tension. Tyrell was sweating. His hair was plastered to his forehead. He was playing faster and faster, trying to outrun his own thoughts. Suddenly, there was a loud snap. One of his guitar strings broke, whipping against his hand. It stung, but he didn't care. He just threw the guitar onto the amplifier stand in disgust. "This is garbage!" he yelled, kicking the leg of the stand. The amp wobbled but didn't fall over. "I'm never gonna get out of this place. I'm gonna be stuck here forever." He put his face in his hands and sat down on the edge of the stage, his legs dangling over the side. He was breathing hard, fighting back tears of anger. The other kids in the center stopped what they were doing. The basketball game slowed down, then stopped. The bouncing ball finally rolled away into a corner. They watched Tyrell, but they didn't know what to do. They felt awkward. They were used to him being the confident one, the one with the big dreams. Seeing him fall apart was scary. It made them think about their own fears. Sister Agatha kept walking. Her black shoes squeaked softly on the polished floor. She reached the side of the stage where Tyrell was sitting. He didn't look up. He just kept his head buried in his hands, assuming she was going to tell him to clean up his mess or leave. "I am done," Tyrell mumbled into his palms. "I can't fix that string. I don't have the money. I don't have anything." The old nun stood there silently for a moment. She looked at the broken string, a thin strand of steel coiled uselessly on the floor. Then she looked at the boy. She saw not just a frustrated teenager, but a reflection of the hundreds of kids she had watched grow up in this neighborhood over the decades. She saw the weight of their expectations pressing down on him. Most people saw Sister Agatha as a woman who had no connection to the modern world. They assumed she spent her days praying in silence and reading old books. They thought the music they listened to was just noise to her. They couldn't have been more wrong. She didn't say a word. She just reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder. Her hand was rough and dry, warm through his t-shirt. Tyrell flinched, surprised by the touch. He looked up. His eyes were red. He looked into her face, expecting to see judgment or disappointment. But what he saw surprised him. Her expression wasn't stern. It was calm. There was a softness in her eyes that he had never noticed before. She didn't look like an old lady who hated his music. She looked like someone who understood exactly how he felt. She gave his shoulder a gentle squeeze. Then, she turned and walked away from the stage, heading toward the storage closet at the back of the gym. The teenagers watched her go. They whispered among themselves, wondering what she was doing. Maybe she was getting a broom to sweep up the broken string. Maybe she was going to get the director to handle the situation. Tyrell sat there, feeling empty. The anger had drained out of him, leaving him exhausted. He looked at his guitar lying on the stand. It looked crippled without the string. He felt crippled, too. The gym was quiet now. The only sounds were the distant traffic outside and the buzz of the lights. Everyone was waiting. They didn't know why, but the atmosphere in the room had shifted. It felt like something was about to happen, something that broke the routine of their ordinary lives. Sister Agatha returned from the closet. But she wasn't carrying a broom. And she wasn't carrying a dustpan. She was holding something large and heavy, covered in a layer of gray cloth. She carried it with a strength that defied her age, holding it close to her chest to protect it. She walked back toward the stage, her eyes fixed straight ahead. Tyrell watched her, confused. The other teens drifted closer, forming a semicircle near the stage. They stopped their whispering. The silence grew deeper. Sister Agatha climbed the 3 wooden steps to the stage platform. She moved with a deliberate, careful grace. She didn't look at the audience. She only looked at the space where she was about to stand. She reached the center of the stage, right next to Tyrell's broken amp. She took a deep breath and lowered the object she was carrying onto a stool. The gray cloth slipped off slightly, revealing a corner of something black and shiny. Tyrell squinted, trying to see what it was. It looked like a case, but not for a flute or a trumpet. It was too big for that. Sister Agatha's hands, usually so busy with mops and cleaning rags, moved with a sudden, strange tenderness. She undid the latches on the case. Click. 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 The sound echoed through the quiet gym. She paused for a fraction of a second, her fingers hovering over the lid, as if she were saying a silent prayer. Then, she lifted the lid. The gasp that went through the room wasn't loud, but it was unanimous. Inside the velvet-lined case sat a beautiful, electric guitar. It wasn't a cheap student model. It was a vintage instrument, with a sunburst finish that glowed under the gym lights. The wood looked flawless, the chrome hardware sparkled. It looked like it belonged in a museum, not in a dusty community center in Philadelphia. Tyrell stood up. He stared at the instrument, his mouth slightly open. He looked from the guitar to Sister Agatha and back again. He couldn't believe his eyes. This quiet, old woman, who he had ignored for years, had brought this treasure into the room. And the way she looked at it with love, with respect, with a hint of longing told him that this wasn't just something she had found. It was something she knew. The air in the gym felt heavy, like the weight of the whole city was pressing down on the ceiling. Tyrell stood next to the old metal stool, his eyes glued to the open case. Inside, the vintage guitar looked like a sleeping beast made of gold and wood. It was the kind of instrument he had only seen on posters in music magazines or on television screens behind glass at expensive pawn shops. He didn't dare touch it. His hands were still shaking a little from his earlier outburst, and they felt rough and dirty compared to the polished beauty of the instrument. Sister Agatha stood quietly beside him. She didn't say a word about the stunned silence that filled the room. She didn't look at the crowd of 20 or so teenagers who had gathered near the stage, their basketball game completely forgotten. Her attention was entirely on the boy. She saw the hunger in his eyes, but she also saw the fear. She saw the way he clenched and unclenched his fists, nervous energy vibrating through his arms. She reached into the case and lifted the guitar. It looked heavy in her hands, but she held it effortlessly. She turned it around, checking the tuning pegs with a familiarity that was startling. It was as if she were greeting an old friend she hadn't seen in a very long time. She adjusted the strap, sliding it over her head and resting the instrument against her hip. The contrast was jarring: the stark, black and white habit of a nun, and the sleek, rock and roll silhouette of an electric guitar. Tyrell finally found his voice. It came out as a croak, dry and hesitant. "Sister, what is that?" he asked. "Is that real?" The older woman looked at him, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "It is real, Tyrell," she said softly. "It is as real as the air in your lungs." "But, why do you have it?" he stammered. "I thought nuns. I mean, aren't you supposed to have, a harp or something?" A few of the boys in the back snickered, but Sister Agatha didn't get upset. She simply let out a short, quiet chuckle. It was a warm sound, like dry leaves blowing over pavement. "God does not mind what instrument we use to speak to Him," she said, her voice surprisingly steady for her age. "And sometimes, people need a language other than prayer to understand how they feel." She looked down at the guitar and ran her thumb gently over the strings. A low, warm hum resonated through the amplifier, even though it wasn't plugged in yet. The sound sent a shiver down Tyrell's spine. It was a tone he had been chasing for years but could never produce with his battered, second-hand equipment. Tyrell looked at his own guitar lying on the stand nearby. The broken string hung loose like a dead worm. He felt a wave of wash over him. The competition was in 2 days. He had spent every dime he had on the entry fee, leaving nothing for repairs or new strings. He had poured his heart into his audition tape, but he hadn't heard back yet. The silence from the competition organizers felt louder than the noise in this gym. He felt like his dreams were slipping through his fingers, turning into dust just like the floor he stood on. "I can't play," Tyrell said, his voice cracking. He looked down at his sneakers. "My guitar is busted. I'm done. I'm not going to make it. I'm just going to be stuck here forever, working at the grocery store or fixing tires." He expected the sister to give him a lecture. He expected her to tell him to work harder, or to have faith, or to pray about it. Adults usually said things like that when they didn't know what else to say. They gave you words that sounded nice but didn't fill the empty hole in your stomach. But Sister Agatha didn't say any of that. She didn't offer empty platitudes. She simply reached out and grabbed a cable from the floor. She plugged it into the guitar with a firm click. Then, she walked over to the amplifier Tyrell had been using. It was a cheap, buzzing thing, but it was all they had. She bent down slowly, her knees creaking audibly, and turned the knobs on the amp. She didn't turn it up to 10, the way Tyrell usually did. She set it to a clean, moderate volume. "Play," she said. She held the guitar out to him, offering the neck. Tyrell took a step back, shaking his head violently. "No way," he said. "I can't play that. It's worth more than my life. I'll break it. I'm not good enough." Sister Agatha didn't lower the guitar. She stood there holding it, her arm surprisingly steady. "It is not about being good enough yet, Tyrell," she said. "It is about being brave enough to try. The wood is strong. It can handle your mistakes. And the strings, they are made to be bent. They are made to feel your pain." He looked at the instrument again. It was calling to him. It was like a temptation he couldn't resist. Slowly, shakily, he reached out. His hands wrapped around the neck. The finish on the back of the guitar felt smooth and cool against his palm. He lifted the strap over his shoulder. It felt heavy, but it was a good weight. It felt substantial. It felt like a weapon against his sadness. He positioned his fingers over the fretboard. He looked at the crowd. His friends were staring at him with wide eyes. Even the kids who usually made fun of him were quiet now. The anticipation in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Tyrell took a deep breath. He closed his eyes for a second and thought about everything that was bothering him. He thought about the bills his mom couldn't pay. He thought about the neighborhood that kept getting rougher. He thought about the silence from the music competition. He poured all that frustration into his hand and struck a chord. It wasn't a clean chord. It was messy and loud, but the tone that came out of the amplifier was incredible. It sang. It rang out with a clarity that Tyrell had never heard before in this gym. The sound bounced off the brick walls and seemed to hang in the air, shimmering. Tyrell opened his eyes, shocked by the sound coming from his own hands. He struck another chord. Then another. He started to play the riff he had been practicing for months, the one he was going to play at the audition. But without the broken string holding him back, and with this superior instrument responding to his touch, the music changed. It flowed better. It sounded angrier, but also sadder. It sounded like the truth. He played for a minute, his confidence growing with every note. He started to move, finding the rhythm in his hips. He forgot about the broken guitar on the stand. He forgot about the sister standing next to him. He just played. Then, suddenly, he stopped. He looked down at his hands, which had started to cramp. He looked up at Sister Agatha, his face flushed. "It's broken," he said, referring to his own guitar. "I can't play the show with this. I have to give this back." Sister Agatha smiled, a mysterious little smile that hinted at secrets she had kept for decades. She stepped closer to the microphone stand. She wasn't holding the guitar anymore, but her presence was still commanding. "Music is not about the object, Tyrell," she said. "It is about the spirit. But sometimes, the spirit needs a voice that can shout loud enough to be heard." She looked around the room at the other teenagers. They were mesmerized. They were seeing their friend in a new light, and they were seeing her in a light that didn't make sense. It was like watching a statue come to life. "Today," she said, her voice carrying across the gym, "we are going to fix what is broken. Not just the string, but the fear, too." Tyrell felt a lump form in his throat. He didn't know what she meant, but he felt a sudden rush of hope. It wasn't a solution to his money problems, and it didn't guarantee him a spot in the competition, but it was something. It was a moment of connection he hadn't expected. He looked at the sister, really looked at her, for the first time. He noticed the calluses on the tips of her fingers, almost invisible but definitely there. He noticed the way she stood, with a slight bend in her knees, like a guitarist ready to move. He noticed the look in her eyes, a fire that had been banked but not extinguished. A thought started to form in the back of his mind, a crazy, impossible thought. He looked down at her hands again. The fingers were worn and wrinkled, spotted with age, but the tips were hard. "Sister," Tyrell asked slowly, a hunch forming in his mind. "How do you know how to hold it like that?" The room went silent. The buzzing of the lights seemed to get louder. The teenagers stopped breathing. They waited for her answer. Sister Agatha looked at her hands, then back at Tyrell. A shadow passed over her face, a memory of smoke-filled rooms and late-night stages, a life lived before the veil. She didn't answer him right away. She just reached out and touched the wood of the guitar Tyrell was holding. "I know," she said softly, "because a long time ago, before I was Sister Agatha, I used to make the walls shake just like you." The silence that followed her words was absolute. It was the kind of quiet that feels heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm, but there wasn't a cloud in the sky outside the high windows. 30 pairs of eyes were fixed on the old woman standing on the wooden stage. Tyrell stood frozen, his mouth slightly open, the vintage guitar still hanging from his shoulder. He looked at her hands, the wrinkled skin, the prominent veins, the slight tremor in her fingers, and then he looked back at her face, trying to find a trace of the rock star she claimed to have been. "You," Tyrell finally managed to squeak out. He shook his head, a nervous laugh escaping his lips. "No way. You're pulling my leg. You're a nun. You sweep floors. You tell us to pick up our trash." "I do all those things," Sister Agatha said calmly. Her voice wasn't shaky anymore. It had dropped an octave, sounding richer and smoother than it usually did during morning prayers. "But that is not all I am. Just like you are not just a boy with a broken guitar. We are both more than what people see. She reached out and gently took the instrument back from him. Tyrell let it go without a fight, too confused to resist. Sister Agatha sat down on the metal stool, adjusting her long skirt so it covered her knees. She positioned the guitar on her lap. For a moment, she just stared at the neck, caressing the fretboard like she was comforting a sick child. Back before this building was even built, she began, speaking to the room, I played in a band called the Velvet Chords. We played in tiny bars down on South Street. We played until my fingers bled and my ears rang. The teenagers exchanged glances. Some of them looked skeptical, crossing their arms and rolling their eyes. Others, like Tyrell, leaned in closer, captivated by the change in her demeanor. She didn't look like a little old lady right now. She looked like she was remembering something that made her feel alive. I didn't pick up a guitar for 40 years, she continued. When I joined the order, I made a promise to leave that life behind. I thought music was selfish. I thought it was about me wanting attention. So I put the guitar in the case, locked it, and hid it away in the back of a closet. I thought I was doing the right thing. She looked up at Tyrell, her eyes piercing and serious. But listening to you play these last few months, struggling with that old piece of wood, I realized something. God gave us music to help us carry the heavy things. It isn't a sin to play loud if it helps you heal. I kept this guitar safe, but it was lonely. Instruments need to be played, Tyrell. Just like people need to be heard. With that, she adjusted the volume knob on the guitar itself. She didn't look like a sweet grandmother now. She looked like a musician about to work. She positioned her left hand on the neck, her fingers finding the shapes automatically, and her right hand hovered over the strings. Are you ready? She asked him. Ready for what? Tyrell asked, his heart pounding against his ribs. To stop being scared, she said. She didn't count off. She didn't say 1, 2, 3, 4. She just struck the strings. The sound that exploded from the amplifier was nothing short of a miracle. It wasn't the gentle strumming of a folk song or the polite plucking of a hymn. It was a driving, dirty, rhythmic blues riff. It was the kind of sound that grabs you by the chest and shakes you. The low notes vibrated through the floorboards, shaking the dust off the basketball hoops. Tyrell jumped back, his eyes wide. The other kids gasped. Sister Agatha didn't smile. She was focused. Her head bobbed slightly to the rhythm, her foot tapping out the beat on the hollow stage floor. She played a sequence of chords that sounded sad but strong at the same time. It was the sound of survival. She looked at Tyrell and nodded her head toward the microphone stand. Sing, she commanded him. I don't know what to sing. Tyrell yelled over the noise of the amp. Sing about the broken string, she shouted back, never missing a beat. Sing about being stuck. Sing about the heat. Sing about anything, but sing. Tyrell took a deep breath. He grabbed the mic. He closed his eyes and let the music guide him. At first, his voice was hesitant, just a shout over the noise. But as Sister Agatha's rhythm locked in, he found a melody. He started improvising lyrics about the heat, about the hard floor, about wanting to get out. Sun beating down on the concrete floor, he sang, his voice gaining strength. Trying to find a way, trying to find a door. Sister Agatha shifted her playing. She heard what he was doing and she wove her guitar around his voice, supporting him, lifting him up. She bent a string, making the guitar cry, a sound that mimicked the pain in his voice. It was a conversation without words. The boy was talking about his frustration, and the old woman was telling him she understood. The teenagers in the gym were mesmerized. They had seen Tyrell play before, but they had never seen him like this. He wasn't showing off. He wasn't trying to look cool. He was raw. And they had never seen her like this. The woman who usually scolded them for running in the halls was now the coolest person in the world. She was shredding. One of the younger kids, a boy named Leo who usually just sat in the corner and watched, pulled his phone out of his pocket. He didn't really know why. He just felt like he needed to capture this. He hit record, aiming the camera at the stage. The lens focused on the contrast between the nun's habit and the electric guitar, a visual that made no sense but felt perfect. On stage, the song was building. Tyrell was sweating, pouring his soul into the lyrics. He hit a high note that cracked slightly, but he held it, turning the crack into emotion. Sister Agatha watched him, and a small smile finally appeared on her face. It was a smile of pride. She saw the potential in him that he was finally starting to see in himself. She played a fill, a flurry of notes that climbed up the neck of the guitar like a staircase. She hit the high notes with precision, her fingers moving with a speed that seemed impossible for her age. The pain in her hands, which she felt every morning when she woke up, was gone. The arthritis vanished, replaced by the sheer adrenaline of the music. She felt 20 years younger. She felt like she was back in a smoky bar, with the lights dim and the energy high. As the song reached its climax, Tyrell belted out the final line, his voice echoing off the brick walls. "I'm gonna break these chains, I'm gonna fly away." Sister Agatha slammed her hand down on the strings, silencing them instantly, creating a dramatic hush that hung in the air for 3 long seconds. Then, she let the final chord ring out a beautiful, ringing G major that faded slowly into the hum of the amplifier. It was over. The gym was so quiet you could hear the traffic lights changing outside. Tyrell stood panting, his chest heaving, staring at the nun. Sister Agatha slowly took her hands off the instrument. The adrenaline began to fade, and her hands started to tremble again. She let out a long breath and looked up at the audience. For a second, nobody moved. They were just processing what they had heard. It wasn't just a song, it was an experience. It felt like they had witnessed something secret, something holy. Then, Leo, the boy with the phone, whispered, "Whoa." That broke the spell. The room erupted. It wasn't polite applause. It was shouting and cheering. The basketball players were jumping up and down, clapping their hands over their heads. The kids who usually ignored the music program rushed the stage. Tyrell looked at Sister Agatha, tears welling up in his eyes. He didn't know what to say. He felt like he had just run a marathon and climbed a mountain at the same time. "Sister," he stammered. That was the best thing I ever heard." Sister Agatha's face was flushed red. She looked a little embarrassed by the attention. She stood up slowly, the tremor in her legs returning now that the music had stopped. She patted Tyrell on the shoulder. "You have the voice, Tyrell," she said quietly, so only he could hear over the noise. "I just gave you the megaphone." She unplugged the guitar and began to place it back into its case with great care. Her hands were shaking more violently now, and she fumbled slightly with the latch. Tyrell noticed it immediately. He saw the pain etching its way back into her knuckles. He realized that the music had been a gift for both of them, but for her, it was temporary magic that came with a price. "Let me help you," he said gently. He reached out and closed the latches for her, treating the case with the same reverence she had shown it. Sister Agatha looked at him and placed her hand on his cheek. "Don't worry about the competition," she whispered. "You are already a winner. You just have to believe it." Leo in the background looked down at his phone screen. He had captured the whole thing. He watched the last 10 seconds of the video, watching the old nun smile as the cord faded. Without really thinking about it, he typed out a caption and hit post. "Nobody is gonna believe this," he muttered to himself. But he didn't know just how right he was. The world was about to believe it. By the time the sun came up the next morning, the world inside the small, brick community center had changed completely. Usually, the mornings were quiet, filled only by the sound of the cleaning cartwheels squeaking on the linoleum and the smell of strong coffee brewing in the small office. But today, the center was buzzing like a beehive that had been hit with a stick. Sister Agatha arrived at her usual time, just as the light was beginning to turn the sky from black to gray. She was tired. Her hands ached with a deep, throbbing pain that went all the way up to her elbows. Playing the guitar with such intensity yesterday had cost her physically. Her joints were stiff, and her fingers felt swollen, making it hard to even grip the handle of her mop bucket. She moved slowly, her body feeling heavier than usual. She expected to find the gym empty, ready for her morning routine of sweeping up the dust from the day before. Instead, when she pushed through the double doors that led to the main hall, she found people waiting for her. It wasn't a huge crowd, just 10 or 12 of the teenagers who hung around there, but they were awake. They were sitting on the bleachers, holding cups of coffee and donuts from the shop down the street. They were huddled over a single cell phone, watching something on the small screen with wide eyes. As soon as they saw the old nun in her black habit, they jumped up. It was a reaction she had never received before. Usually, they slumped lower in their seats or ignored her completely. Today, they looked at her with a mix of awe and excitement, like she was a celebrity who had just walked off a tour bus. "Sister! Sister Agatha!" Leo called out, running over to her. He was the one who had recorded the video. He held up his phone, waving it in the air. "You have to see this. It's everywhere." The nun frowned slightly, confused. She leaned on her mop handle for support. "What is everywhere, Leo? Did someone get hurt?" "No. No, nobody got hurt," Leo laughed, his voice cracking with energy. "The video. The video of you playing. I put it online last night. Look." He thrust the phone into her face. On the screen, she saw a blurry video of herself sitting on the metal stool. The caption underneath reads simply, "The nun at our center can shred." Sister Agatha didn't understand most of the words on the screen, but she saw the numbers. Underneath the video, there was a little number that said views. It didn't say 100, or even 1,000. It said 450,000. And below that, there were thousands of comments. "My heart," she whispered, putting a hand to her chest. She felt a sudden wave of panic. She had lived a life of privacy for 40 years. The idea of hundreds of thousands of people staring at her made her feel dizzy. "Oh, Leo. Why did you do that? I didn't give permission. The Mother Superior is going to be so cross with me." "She's not going to be cross," a voice said from behind the group. The crowd parted, and Tyrell stepped forward. He looked different than he had yesterday. The defeat was gone from his posture. He stood up straight, his shoulders back. He was holding his own guitar, which now sported a fresh set of strings. "Look at the comments," Tyrell said gently, taking the phone from Leo. He scrolled through the messages. They aren't making fun of you. Listen to this one. I was going to give up on music today, but seeing this old lady play gave me hope. And this one, she plays with more soul than anyone I've heard in years. They love you, sister. They really do. Sister Agatha looked at the screen, reading the words through her thick glasses. She saw message after message of kindness. People from all over the world, from Japan, from England, from Brazil, were leaving little hearts and praying hands emojis. They were calling her the blues nun and the shredding sister. I don't understand, she said, shaking her head slowly. I just wanted to help Tyrell. I just wanted the music to be heard. That's why they love it, Tyrell said. Because it's real. Because nobody expected it. Look, there are reporters calling the center office. They want to interview you. They want to know who you were before you were a nun. The idea of reporters and cameras made Sister Agatha's stomach turn. She looked at her hands, the swollen joints pulsing with pain. She wasn't a young star anymore, she was an old woman who cleaned floors. She didn't want to be famous. She just wanted the music to matter. I don't want to be on the television, she said firmly. I don't want a record deal. I just want peace. Just then, the door to the center office opened, and Mr. Henderson, the director of the community center, came rushing out. He looked frantic, holding a stack of papers. Sister Agatha, he shouted. Did you see the donations? People are donating money to the center because of that video. We have enough to fix the boiler. We have enough to buy new instruments for the kids. We even have enough to send Tyrell to that competition in the city. Tyrell's jaw dropped. Really, the entry fee and the travel? All paid for, Mr. Henderson beamed. And someone sent a message saying they want to sponsor a music program here in your name. The Sister Agatha Music School. Can you believe it? The room erupted in cheers again. The teenagers were high-fiving each other, jumping around. But in the middle of the chaos, Sister Agatha stood still. She looked at the money, looked at the excitement, and then she looked at Tyrell. She realized that God had used her old, aching hands to do something she couldn't do alone. She had prayed for a way to save the center, to save these kids, and the answer had been hiding in a dusty case in the closet. The video wasn't about her. It was about the spirit of the place. It was about proving that it is never too late to use your gifts, and that you should never judge a book by its cover. She walked over to Tyrell and took his free hand. Her grip was weak, but her touch was warm. Go and pack your bag, she told him, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. You are going to that competition. And you are going to play that guitar like you did yesterday. You are going to play for everyone who was ever told they were too old, or too young, or too poor. What about you? Tyrell asked. Are you going to come with me? The reporters, they want to see you. Sister Agatha smiled, a tired but genuine smile. She patted his hand. I have mops to push, Tyrell. And my knees are not made for standing in front of cameras. I did my part. The rest is up to you. But. She paused, looking down at her hands again. The pain was still there, but for the first time in years, her heart didn't feel heavy. It felt light. But Tyrell asked. But if you ever get stuck on a chord, she whispered, leaning in close. Or if you forget why you started playing, you come find me. We still have a lot of songs left in us. The news spread fast. By the afternoon, there were cameras gathered outside the front doors of the community center. They were trying to get a shot of the mystery nun, but Sister Agatha had slipped out the side exit. She had gone to the chapel to pray, leaving Mr. Henderson to handle the press. Inside the gym, the atmosphere was electric. The kids weren't just hanging out, they were picking up instruments. Kids who had only ever listened to music were trying to play it. The money meant they could fix the broken drums and tune the old pianos. The dull, gray gym felt colorful and alive for the first time in decades. Leo sat on the stage, scrolling through his phone. He was refreshing the page over and over. It hit 1 million views, he shouted to the room. 1 million people saw Sister Agatha play. Tyrell was packing his gear into a new case that someone had donated. He smiled as he listened to the number. He knew the world was shocked. They were shocked because an old nun had played the blues better than anyone expected. But he knew the real secret. It wasn't just about the skill. It was about the heart. She hadn't played to become famous. She had played to save a boy's dream. And in doing so, she had saved a little piece of everyone who watched the video. She taught them that passion doesn't retire. It just waits for the right moment to be unleashed. Tyrell slung his bag over his shoulder. He walked to the side door where Sister Agatha had disappeared. He didn't see her, but he knew she was there, listening. He touched the door frame gently. "Thank you," he whispered to the empty hallway. "I won't let you down." He walked out into the bright afternoon sun, ready to face the competition, ready to face the world. The song she had started wasn't over. It was just beginning. And the best part was, the whole world was finally listening. The lights in the big city theater were blindingly bright, hotter than the sun that beat down on the pavement outside. Tyrell stood at the center of the massive stage, his guitar strapped around his neck. Below him, a sea of faces stretched out into the darkness. Hundreds, maybe thousands of people. The air was thick with tension and the smell of dust. This was the night of the competition, the biggest night of his young life. Just a week ago, he was a frustrated teenager in a dusty community center, ready to give up. Now, he was here, all because an 80-year-old nun had picked up a guitar and showed him how to speak with his heart. Tyrell adjusted the microphone stand. His hands were shaking, but not from fear this time. They were shaking from the electricity of the moment. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes for a split second. He saw the image of Sister Agatha in her simple habit, sitting on that metal stool. He remembered the sound of her playing, the way she poured her soul into the wood and strings. That memory gave him the strength to open his eyes and look out at the crowd. "This song is called The Quiet Storm," Tyrell said, his voice booming through the theater speakers. "I didn't write it alone. I wrote it with a friend who taught me that it's never too late to make some noise." He struck the first chord. It rang out clear and loud, cutting through the silence of the room. The audience leaned forward. For the next 4 minutes, Tyrell didn't just play music, he told a story. He played with a raw, gritty passion that stunned the judges. He wasn't trying to be perfect. He was trying to be real. He let his anger, his hope, and his joy flow through his fingers. The theater was dead silent while he played, completely captivated by the boy who played like he had lived a lifetime. When he finished the last note and let it fade into silence, there was a pause. It lasted only a second, and then the place exploded. The applause was deafening, a wave of sound that crashed over the stage. People stood to their feet. They cheered, they whistled, and they stamped their feet. Tyrell stood there, sweat dripping down his face, grinning from ear to ear. He had done it. He had connected with them. Later that evening, after the trophies were handed out, Tyrell took home first place, a shiny gold cup that felt heavy in his hand. The real celebration was waiting for him back home. He didn't go to an expensive after-party with record producers. He asked his driver to take him straight back to the St. Jude's Community Center. It was late, nearly midnight, but the lights in the gym were still on. When Tyrell pushed the heavy doors open, he wasn't expecting a crowd. He was expecting the quiet, empty hall he knew so well. But as soon as he walked in, the lights flickered on, and 50 voices shouted, "Surprise!" The entire neighborhood was there. The basketball kids, the parents, the teachers, and even the local shop owners. They had hung up banners made from old bed sheets that read "Congratulations" and "Our hero." There was a table in the corner piled high with pizzas, sodas, and a cake that looked like it was homemade. And in the center of the room, standing next to a small table with a punch bowl, was Sister Agatha. She was wearing her usual black habit, but someone had placed a funny plastic crown on her head. She looked tired, her eyes drooping a little, but she was smiling the widest smile Tyrell had ever seen. Tyrell ran across the gym floor, ignoring his trophy on the table where he tossed it. He rushed over to her. "I did it, sister. I won!" he shouted, scooping her up into a gentle hug. He spun her around carefully, mindful of her frail frame. "I played exactly like you told me to. I played the truth." Sister Agatha laughed, a sound like rustling leaves. "I heard you, Tyrell. I heard you on the radio in the office. You made an old woman very proud." The crowd swarmed around them, slapping Tyrell on the back, shaking his hand, and ruffling his hair. They treated him like a superstar, but Tyrell kept looking back at Sister Agatha. He saw her slipping away toward the side of the room, needing to sit down. He excused himself from his friends and went to sit with her on the bleachers. "You know," Tyrell said softly, sitting down beside her. "The reporters asked me who my teacher was. They wanted to know where I learned to play like that. I told them about you." Sister Agatha waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, they don't want to hear about an old nun. They want to talk about you, the young star." "They do want to hear about you," Tyrell insisted. "In fact, the video you're in, the one Leo took, it has over 10 million views now, sister." 10 million. The number hung in the air between them. 10 million people. Sister Agatha shook her head slowly, looking down at her lap. "That is too many," she whispered. "I am just a servant. I just clean floors." "No," Tyrell said firmly. He reached over and took her hand, holding it gently. "You are a light. You showed the world that you don't have to be young to be strong. You showed them that music is inside us, no matter what we wear or what job we do." He looked at the crowd of happy people eating pizza and laughing. "Because of you, this center isn't closing. We have money for new instruments. We have money for scholarships. You saved this place, Sister Agatha. You saved all of us." Sister Agatha looked around the gym. She saw the kids laughing, the parents talking, and the hope that filled the room. For years, she had worried about this place. She had worried that the violence outside would eventually leak in and destroy the sanctuary they built here. She had prayed for a miracle. She realized then that miracles didn't always come from the sky. Sometimes, miracles came from dusty guitar cases and the bravery of a young boy who was willing to listen. She squeezed Tyrell's hand. "We saved each other," she corrected him gently. Suddenly, Leo came running over with his phone again. "Sister. Sister. Look. There is a message here from a famous guitarist. You know, the guy with the big hair. He says he wants to come visit and play a song with you. The nun's eyes widened in alarm. Oh, goodness gracious. That is not necessary. I need to sweep the stage before I go to bed. Tyrell laughed out loud. He stood up and pulled the old woman to her feet. The room quieted down as they all looked at her. She looked so small in the middle of the gym, yet her presence felt larger than the building itself. Everyone listen up. Tyrell shouted, his voice echoing off the walls. We all know who the real winner is tonight. It's not me. It's the woman who taught us that your past doesn't define you, and your age doesn't limit you. Let's hear it for Sister Agatha. The gym erupted in cheers again, louder than before. People clapped and stomped their feet. Speech. Speech. Someone chanted. Sister Agatha turned a shade of pink that was visible even under the fluorescent lights. She walked to the center of the stage, feeling like she was floating. She didn't have a speech prepared. She never did. She looked at the faces of the children she had watched grow up. She saw the tears in their eyes and the joy on their faces. I am not a performer, she said simply, her voice quiet but carrying authority. I am just a gardener. I plant seeds, and I water them, and I wait. Sometimes, I wait a very long time to see the flowers bloom. She looked at Tyrell and smiled. This week, I saw a garden bloom in the desert. Thank you for letting me play with you. And thank you for listening to an old lady's heart. She stepped back from the microphone, ending her speech the same way she ended her songs, with honesty and no extra fluff. That night, long after the party ended and the last slice of pizza was eaten, the gym was quiet again. Sister Agatha finished sweeping the floor, pushing the yellow mop bucket toward the closet. Tyrell was waiting by the door, his trophy under his arm. You heading out? He asked. Yes, she said. My back is telling me it is time for sleep. Can I walk you to your room? Tyrell asked. It's dark. I would like that, she said. They walked down the long, quiet hallway together. The shadows danced on the walls as they passed the windows. They didn't say much. They didn't need to. The silence was comfortable, filled with the memory of the music they had shared. When they reached her door, Tyrell stopped. You know, he said, the record producers asked if I wanted to go on tour. Big arenas. Lots of money. And what did you say? She asked, her hand on the handle. I said I'd think about it, Tyrell said. But I told them that wherever I go, I want to come back here. I want to start a class. I want to teach kids like me how to play. And I want you to be the guest teacher every Tuesday. Sister Agatha looked at him, her eyes twinkling in the dim light. Tuesdays are mop days, she said sternly. We can mop after the lesson, Tyrell grinned. She chuckled softly. Very well, Tyrell. I will see you on Tuesday. Good night, sister. Good night, my friend. She went into her room and closed the door. The room was small and plain, with a single bed and a crucifix on the wall. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked at her hands. They were sore, her knuckles swollen, but for the first time in 40 years, they didn't feel useless. She lay down and closed her eyes, drifting off to sleep almost immediately. Her dreams were not silent. They were filled with the sound of roaring crowds and the hum of electric guitars. But mostly, they were filled with the sound of hope echoing through a small gym in Philadelphia, proving to the world that as long as you have a song in your heart, you are never too old to play.